resources non-partisan. We are also a nonprofit, so we provide these trainings and all the materials that we mentioned for free to students and educators across the country who are interested in bringing a voter registration efforts to their school. And with that, I'll turn it over to Olivia from Open Democracy. Olivia, you want to introduce yourself and your team?
Sure. I'm Olivia Zink, the Executive Director of Open Democracy, and we are also a nonpartisan nonprofit, but we are not national. We are here in New Hampshire, but we share the same vision as Molly, that we need to increase, making sure that everyone knows how to register to vote, regardless of what party they register. So we're excited to co-host this event. It's great to see students and educators and other volunteers here. Shout out to the students, who might be going off to driver's ed later tonight. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Folks, I see some familiar faces. I'm so excited to see some returnees and welcome new folks into this work. Here is what you are in for tonight. The goals of this workshop are as follows. We'll start with a little bit on the latest on youth voter registration nationwide as well as in your home state. Then we'll talk about the steps to registering to vote in New Hampshire, highlighting what this means for our newest voters, our 18-year-olds, and what we need to consider when running a voter registration drive that targets this most newly eligible group of young voters. Next, we'll talk about this joint initiative, Cap, Gown, and Ballot. This is a kind of an annual effort to mobilize educators, students, and schools in running voter registration efforts before the end of the school year so that all eligible seniors have a meaningful opportunity to register to vote before they go off into the world. Finally, we'll talk about next steps for each of your drives. We'll have some time open for us to join breakout groups to discuss in more detail what a drive might look like in a given school or community. And we'll offer ways that both the Civics Center and Open Democracy can provide ongoing support and resources as you bring these drives to life. Does this sound like the workshop that everyone signed up for? Give me like a thumbs up. I see nods. Beautiful. Excellent. Okay. Cool. We're in the right Zoom room. Excellent. Okay. So I asked in the chat, what are some of the issues that matter most to the folks in this Zoom room? I saw, obviously, a lot of folks who are passionate about democracy and the strength and participation in our democratic norms and systems. I saw folks mention women's rights. I saw folks mention education. I've seen, I think there's a wide ranging list of issues that motivate each and every one of us to want to participate in civic life in one way or another. I want to give us some insight into what are the top issues among our newest voters, our 18 and 19-year-olds. This survey was done by Tufts University's Circle Project, which I highly recommend if you're interested in looking more into research around youth civic participation and engagement. They do really incredible work trying to get into the minds and hearts of our youngest voters and find what drives them and motivates them. They did this survey in 2022 leading up to the midterm elections about what were the issues that resonated most deeply to them at the time. This is national data. So this was 18 and 19-year-olds across the country aggregated. But you can see that they care about a lot of different issues: inflation and gas prices, abortion access and reproductive health care, jobs that pay a living wage, gun violence prevention, climate change, racism, crime and safety, student loan debt and college affordability, housing costs, healthcare costs, individual liberty and freedom of speech, immigration, really students care about a lot of the same things that other age groups do. I think folks on this call can find at least one issue that also resonates with them on this list. That's important for a couple of reasons. I think inflation and gas prices is a really strong example. Inflation and gas prices, and if you think back to the midterm elections in 2022, inflation was even higher than it is now. Gas prices were even higher than they are now. That affected each and every one of us in our ability to live our day-to-day lives. But if you put yourself in the shoes of an 18 or 19-year-old, one who may just be for the first time getting maybe a full-time job, might still be going to school and maybe only able to work part-time on the side for spending money or for savings. Inflation and gas prices can eat into a tremendous amount of their earning, spending, and saving power. Whereas if you're like me, have been working for a decade or more, have some savings, have some stability, inflation and gas prices is a real challenge, but is more there's a little bit more savings to absorb the shock. My positioning is a little bit different than an 18 or a 19-year-old. I think the impact of inflation and gas prices has a more acute effect on their day-to-day life. Climate change too. I can imagine that a lot of folks on this call are passionate and driven by the effects of climate change, but it is the youngest voters who will experience the longest term effects of climate change. We are all experiencing some effects right now, but it is the youngest voters who have the most at stake when this issue comes to our ballot. All that is to say is that it is important for all of us to it is great that all of us have these shared issues that drive us to participate in elections, but we must have the specific and unique voices of 18 and 19-year-olds because they have a unique perspective on these issues that face us all. We need their voices. We need their perspectives as we are making policy so that we can design a community, a society that meets their needs for the long term. That poses a challenge because right now the youngest voters have the lowest voter turnout of any other generation of Americans. You probably know this intuitively, but let me put it in very graphic terms. 18 to 29-year-olds are our youngest cohort of voters, has always unfailingly had the lowest voter turnout of any other age group. At times, less than half the turnout of our oldest generation of Americans, 60 and over. Every age group fluctuates a little bit between presidential and midterm years, but the youngest cohort fluctuates the most dramatically. So not only do older Americans have more of a say in general in elections, but also specifically in midterm elections or off-year elections when other important decisions are being made beyond the president, but our youngest voters are kind of left out of the conversation. That said, there is hope. We see them when we look further into the data that young people turn out at really high rates when they are registered to vote. In every presidential election since 2004, more than 75% of registered 18 to 24-year-olds voted. It is not a matter of apathy. We feel that one of the biggest barriers to encouraging our youngest voters to participate in our democracy is dealing with the kind of bureaucratic process of registering to vote. If we can address this, if we can build better systems to overcome this barrier, we know that young people will take advantage of it, will choose to participate in our democracy. I want to give us a little pop quiz. So I've been talking about national data up until this point, but let's look closer to home. In New Hampshire, 17,000 people turn 18 every year. 17,000 people turn 18 every year. What percentage of them are registered to vote? You'll see that there's a poll, a quiz popping up for you on your screen. Go ahead and give me a guess. What percentage of 18-year-olds do you believe are registered to vote? Is it A, under 20%, B, 20 to 40, or C, above 40? We're at 85% participation. Get it a little closer to 100%. All right. Give you 5 more seconds to drop your answer in the chat. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right.
Matthew, do you want to give the results? Matthew, if you want to unmute and share the answer.
I can do it for him if that works. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Casson. I'm the high school voter registration coordinator with Open Democracy. According to the poll here, we have 76% of you said under 20% and 24% of you said B, 20 to 40%.
The true answer, only about 15.6% of 18-year-olds are registered to vote in New Hampshire. Now, you know, it says a lot that no one chose C as above 40%. I think we all knew coming into this call that this is a challenge, but it is really important to keep in mind that you know, we have a long way to go in terms of making sure our youngest voters are registered. And just to drive it home, 80% of voters age 35 and above are registered to vote in New Hampshire. The state overall, you know, has such a strong culture of democratic participation and registration. There's so we need to figure out a way to support our youngest voters and make sure they feel welcomed into our democracy as early as possible. Taking a look at our a little bit more kind of county data, we know that 83% of New Hampshire 18-year-olds who registered turned out to vote in the 2022 midterms. Again, the trend of students who overcome the barrier of registration turning out to vote applies in New Hampshire as well. We see it. We see that young people who are supported in kind of making this transition to becoming participating citizens, they will take us up on the offer. Here, just for a little bit of a look, you can see across the state, county by county registration of 18-year-olds. So you can get a sense of just like where that community efforts can also contribute to this effort. If we, a number of these counties are places where high school voter registration drives have been held in the last year. We know that this effort can really boost the registration rates of 18-year-olds.
And Molly, I just want to add that, you know, 2 years ago, this was at 12%. And so we know that the high school voter registration drives that Kevin organized as a Winnicott teacher or Steve as a Portsmouth parent, or that were held, you know, at Hanover High and Lebanon High, were those drives that helped bump that number up, or the drive that Sam and Sydney did at Pittsfield High.
Yes, I think the one thing that I want to take away from from this section is like, yes, the current state of 18-year-old voter registration is low, but we've seen over the last year and a half or 2 years of working together on supporting these voter registration drives in high schools. We've seen over the course of 2 years, we've seen a doubling of this rate of youth voter registration, but we know that we can do more by inspiring these drives across the state. All right, all right. I wanted to take one moment before we dive into the kind of nitty-gritty of eligibility requirements and how to register in the state to talk a little bit about what messages we're sending to the youngest voters when we're asking them to register to vote. So in the chat, I want to give everyone about a minute or so to think and consider. What would you say to a young person who isn't sure why they should register to vote? I'm curious to hear from this group. What, in your perspective, would you say face-to-face to a young person who is on the fence about registering to vote as soon as possible? I'm hoping some of these responses we can gather and share so that young people who are running drives have some resources to share with their peers, talking points and ways that they can talk to their friends and classmates about why it's so important to register to vote. So for about 1 minute, brainstorm and then drop in the chat, what's one thing you would say to a young person who isn't sure why they should register? Thank you, folks. About 20 more seconds left. Finish your thoughts.
You're in a lot of making your voices heard. Your voice matters. Your voice counts. Your vote counts.
I do see a lot of folks also connecting specific issues with their vote. Absolutely. I think when I've worked with high school students across the country who are running a voter registration drive, the #1 question that they are really surprised by when they ask someone if they're registered, a student will say, registered for what? Just for president? Or what else do I get to vote on? Like, I think our processes can be pretty opaque, and not all students know what tremendous power their vote holds on all different types of issues. All right, folks, thank you so much for dropping these in the chat. We're going to kind of collect these and sort these and ideally kind of share some ideas for other students who run drives in their school communities about how they can talk to their friends and classmates about the importance of registering to vote. All right, with that, let's dive into some of the details. This next section, we're going to talk about the kind of nuts and bolts of how to register in New Hampshire and what that means for our teenagers who are registering to vote for the first time. I'll turn it over to Olivia to take us through it.
Great. So some of you may know that in New Hampshire, you have to register in person. You have to do it with your town or city clerk or a supervisor of the checklist. And you can either do this 6 to 13 days prior to an election or on election day. The things you have to, in order to register to vote, you have to be 18 years old or older by election day. So if you're 17 now, but will be 18 before the September primary, you are eligible to register to vote. You have to be a US citizen and you have to live in New Hampshire. Domicile is the word in the state law, but you know, most people think of that as where you sleep every night. And in order to register to vote, you have to prove 4 things. You have to prove your age, that you're 18 years old. You have to prove your identity with a photo ID. You have to prove where you live, and you have to prove that you are a US citizen. Those are the 4 documents. We put in the box some of the documents that are, this is not an exhaustive list. There are other documents that prove your age, identity, domicile, but we put this list together of things that students might have, like their pay stub, if they have a job. You know, if their pay stub has their address on it, it counts to prove domicile. You know, your student photo ID counts as an identity if you don't have your driver's license yet. Your birth certificate will cover your age, and it will prove that you're a citizen. So some of these documents will prove multiple things. If you have your current address on your driver's license, that also proves where you live. If you don't have the original copy of your birth certificate with you on the day you register, you can sign a document called an affidavit, which is the current law, but there is some pending legislation right now that could change that. So I just sort of put that as a asterisk. There's a bill that passed the House but hasn't had its hearing yet in the Senate. So just want you to know that this is the current requirements, and the, you know, what could happen at the State House could change this requirements by the time you have a drive. So check back in with us when you have your drive, but this is the current eligibility requirements to register.
Any questions so far on the eligibility requirements or the documents needed to prove eligibility? Rishi.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I actually go to a boarding school down in Exeter, and I was just wondering, you know, how first of all, if, you know, students who are living here 9 months out of the year who are US citizens would be eligible to vote, and if so, how they would prove their domicile, because I don't think we typically have, you know, phone bills or licenses registered in New Hampshire.
That's a great question. And yes, you are able to vote in New Hampshire if you live in New Hampshire, just like a college student who goes to UNH is able to vote in New Hampshire. I know at St. Paul's School, which is a private school in Concord, the school was able to put a list of where everyone lives and give it to the city of Concord to prove domicile for everybody. So that was what St. Paul's did, but it would be interesting if you could talk to somebody from your administration. Do you have like a letter that you got that says you were assigned to this dorm?
Definitely think we could produce something like that. Thank you so much.
And the other thing that's tricky, I'll just say this, like, because there is like one campus that has, you know, people that live in one town and one in another town. So you have to make sure that has the full complete address of that domicile. And I want to just point out, Liz Tantarelli is on this call from the League of Women Voters, and the League of Women Voters has some great resources as well. So
I'm Donna Archibald from Phillips Exeter Academy, and we do provide, we can get a list of all the students and their residents on campus to help them register. So that is an option for us here at Phillips Exeter.
great, thank you, Donna.
All right.
This is Jackie Weatherspoon on the team with Donna at Phillips Exeter. Not only do we provide a list that comes out of our dean's office, they provide a list, and we provide a second list of the address of each dormitory, like St. Paul's. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Karen?
So I had a question about registering kids that we know are going to be off at college come election time for absentee. Is that something that we're going to cover?
Yeah, I can answer that right now. So if I think that it's important for kids to realize, like, if they're domiciled, tell me what town you live in, Karen.
New Boston.
New Boston. So if you live in New Boston, and you go off to college, I'm just going to say you go to Keene State College. Students will have the chance to either vote from Keene if they choose to, or vote from New Boston, which is their parents, if their parents are still domiciled there. And if they do choose to register and go off to college, they can request an absentee ballot from their home community. And I think that's almost the best thing to do, especially if students don't know where they're going to be in the fall. That is a good recommendation.
Okay, because when we were campaigning, we ran into so many people who were like, "Oh, my daughter's in Connecticut at college, but she would vote for you." Oh no. So catching them, getting them registered before the summer gets late and they have to head up to college, and then talking to them again, probably before they head up to college, to say, you need to request an absentee.
Right. Yeah. So that's a second step in the process after they're registered. Molly, do you want to go to the next slide? So I just want to say this again, you have to register to vote in person. So you have to either do the voter registration in person by visiting the town or city clerk's office, or visiting your supervisor of the checklist, or same day. Unless you are disabled, you are able to register to vote by mail for people with disabilities. I can't show you the voter registration form because the only people who are able to show you the voter registration forms are your town or city clerk and your supervisor of the checklist. But if people live in cities, it asks you for your address and your ward number. So you as a helper can help people understand what ward they live in. If you live in a town, this is completely irrelevant. So the person who asked me about Newfound, people who live in Bristol don't have a ward number because Bristol's just one town. They need the place and their date of birth, their date of naturalization if they were born outside of the US. They will not need any previous voter registration information, but that is a question on the form that sometimes trips students up, like, where was I previously registered? If you hadn't registered before, you don't have to put it. Students do have to pick a party affiliation. They can register Republican, Democrat, or undeclared. We hear a lot about independents. You cannot register as an independent. You cannot register as a libertarian or Green Party in New Hampshire. You can choose 3 options. And undeclared is the option if you want to not declare a party. You also have to do the proof of those 4 things that I talk, and there's an important piece that they have to sign on that form.
All right. Okay, so we've talked about the eligibility requirements, the ID requirements, the fact that students have to go in person and either meet with their town or city clerk's office or a supervisor of the checklist to complete the registration form. We wish we could show you the form so that you can anticipate questions, but here's a list of what the form asks for in case, so you can anticipate frequently asked questions from students. Any questions from the group? Kevin? Oh, good to see you,
Yes,
Kevin.
good evening, folks. The interesting thing that happened with us was when the clerks came in, they did tell us that the kids had to have birth certificates to show their citizenship, and the students did. But when I was at the polls for the town vote, there were people that registering that day were not showing birth certificates. So how does that match up? Where on the one hand,
they're
it's
signing
required, on
an
the other hand, it's not.
affidavit. Yep.
You know what? They wouldn't let us sign the affidavit at school.
They should
But
be.
that's what the difference is?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
But that could just be your supervisor of the checklist. I'm happy to talk with you about how we get Nancy Stiles to bring affidavits. Or your supervisor of the checklist.
Deborah.
How do you see these pictures of lots of kids registering? It looks like at high schools. How do you have them not at their town? What are they signing? A picture that we have, that we see with all the tables?
Yeah, so that was Portsmouth High School, and Portsmouth actually is a school that came, and Steve, who's on the call, actually helped organize. So he got the Portsmouth clerk to go, and the supervisor of the checklist in Rye and Newcastle and Greenfield and the other schools that go to feed into Portsmouth High.
So you have to get your town clerk to go to your high school to provide that service when you do it in school. Is that
Sorry,
right?
Newfield. Sorry, not Greenland. Sorry. Thank you,
Greenland,
Steve.
yeah.
But you have to get your town clerk to go to the school and give up that, give that time to do that service.
Yep,
that
and we're gonna get there because there's another strategy too, where you
Okay.
can do a field trip to the town clerk's office.
Great, okay.
Someone
Liz,
else had,
I think it was
someone
Liz.
else had- yeah, Liz, question?
I was going to answer Kevin's question about why adults don't necessarily have to show a birth certificate, but they wanted it at the high school registration. Probably because at the high school registration, the birth certificate also proves age. So if they didn't have anything else to prove age, it's doing that as well as citizenship. And maybe that's what they thought was more critical. I'm theorizing, but it kind of makes sense to me.
Thank you, Liz. Thank
Well,
you.
many of the kids had driver's licenses. Those weren't sufficient because the clerk, and as noted, wanted citizenship proven with the birth certificate or a U.S. passport.
Mm.
Yep, so you have to prove all four of those things.
And it is kind of interesting too, for folks that are doing regional schools, that you have to get different towns in. And not all the clerks might actually be asking for the birth certificate. They might be willing to sign an affidavit.
Well, so
So you
when
got to kind of see if they're going to be on the same page.
when I was younger, my mom sent me with a photocopy of my birth certificate. I guess she didn't trust me when I was 18 years old. But the clerk told me I had to come back with the original. So I had to make a second trip to my clerk's office. So you should also clarify that too, if your clerk will accept the photocopy or the original, but many clerks want the original birth certificate.
Right, it sounds like we're starting to get into good questions about what is this, we have these guidelines and around voter registration, IDs that students need to bring. There's some coordination here. What does a drive look like when we have to kind of get students' ducks in a row to be able to register to vote? So that brings us to what we're all here for. The Civics Center and Open Democracy, New Hampshire partner every year around what we call Cap, Gown, and Ballot. This initiative to inspire schools to run voter registration drives before the end of the school year, before all these students graduate and kind of scatter. This is one of the last and best opportunities we have to really equitably make sure all students have a chance to be invited and welcomed into our democracy. With that, I want to turn it over to Sam from Open Democracy to talk us through some of the steps to actually organizing a voter registration drive. And maybe we can also hear from some of the folks on the call that have helped support either their students or their school or a school in their community in running a drive as well. Sam, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. I'm sure many of you have probably gotten emails from me in the past weeks or so, and so it's good to kind of put some faces to the email addresses and the names that I've been speaking with. A lot of questions that came in were regarding strategies and previous voter registration drives that we held. And so step one is choosing your strategy. each school is going to have their own challenges. You know, so as a resident of Manchester, you know, we have 3 public high schools and a handful of private high schools as well. So inviting the supervisors of the checklist or the city clerk or town clerk to your school, you know, is an option that you can choose. For smaller schools, you know, Franklin has taken field trips to their town clerk's office, their city clerk's office, because they're centrally located. You know, they're essentially right across the street or a block away from their clerk's office, and therefore they can, you know, have that field trip to go to the clerk's office and register there. And we talked about regional high schools a little bit already. Portsmouth being one of them. Mascoma Valley Regional is a regional high school as well, where you will have to invite multiple town supervisors. Some schools opt to have these voter registration drives on one singular day, where they invite multiple town supervisors or clerks all on one day to best serve their community. Or you can string it out into a week. Say you have 5 towns going to your high school. Say Monday, we can use Mascoma Valley, right? Say on Monday, they can bring in the supervisor of the checklist or town clerk from Enfield. And then Tuesday, they can bring in the supervisor of the checklist or town clerk for Grafton. And Wednesday, they can choose Orange, etc. So those are some options that you have. As you can see on the photos, these are some drives that have been held in the past. In the top right, that's Ella from Laconia High School, and in the bottom was Alvern High School. Some options that you can choose here, in class, out of class, are classroom walkthroughs or assemblies. It's important to have a captive audience of eligible students. This way you can cast the widest net possible and include all students all eligible students to participate. You have the ability to provide education or interactive activities for these students. Obviously, they're young and kind of trying to find and make their way into the world. And so having these activities or educational presentations can kind of help them figure out what they need and what works best for them. You're going to need access to class time, ideally for an hour. Obviously, some schools are regimented in their schedules, and so therefore you may need to take less than an hour. It's something that again is dependent on the school and dependent on the needs there. And then you're going to need materials, including a presentation, talking points, pens, business cards, etc., to stay in contact with these folks. And do you want to go
I'll
to the
add here,
Sure.
Sam. So Olivia dropped in the chat a link to the story about Ella's drive, and her particular drive kind of represents the assembly style of drive. Like, she set up a voter registration event in her school library with the support of her campus librarian, and invited classrooms to kind of take a break from their class space and come to the library for some games and learning around civic engagement. And they made a voter registration kind of table available there. So this is kind of one strategy that schools can take to kind of highlight the benefit of this kind of strategy, either bringing the drive to the classroom or to an assembly, is that you have an opportunity to not just fill out the form, but create an event and a learning opportunity around it. If folks on the call, we're going to talk through some other strategies for drives, but we've worked with different campuses who wanted to do more events or games around civic engagement. I know some folks on the call mentioned kind of mock elections and things like that earlier. These types of interactive activities can help help students see the impact of their vote and become more motivated to want to participate. So just one option for how drives have come to be. Sam, do you want me to go to the next slide?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool.
Another option you can do is school day or event tabling. This is where you set up long tables. We mentioned cap, gown, and ballot. That is more of a school day event tabling event, and it can feel like a celebration, right? So cap, gown, and ballot. You know, as students, as seniors, kind of go to their senior day events and they pick up their caps and their gowns. You know, we just add another table on essentially, where they can register to vote. And in the photo here in Portsmouth High, you can see it kind of working in ideally how you want it to go. And it can feel like a celebration. Like I said, these are the end of the year activities. And so if you create a civic culture and a culture of civic engagement, it feels less like a hassle to go through and more like a celebration of emerging into the adult world, if you will. There's some drawbacks to this. You're going to have less time with the eligible audience, so you're not going to have as much voter education or fun time games and events like Molly mentioned. But it is an efficient way nonetheless. To hold this, you're going to need to embed educational elements before the drives. It's important to publicize these events, as we'll get into a little bit here in the coming slides. You're going to need to make announcements. You're going to need to have flyers on what students are going to need to bring, letters home to parents about, like we mentioned, birth certificates, social media posts, as you know, young people are all on social media nowadays. And you're going to need more materials overall to accommodate groups of students and students in large numbers.
I saw some good points in the chat. How about during lunchtime? Lunchtime can be it depends on the school if that's a good time. If students, you know, are busy finishing their homework for the next period that's due, or you know that's our only precious like free 20-minute break in the day. Like some students might not be motivated to like stop and fill out a form for a few minutes. And so some of the best practices that we advise are around kind of tagging voter registration onto existing events or activities where students are already, like the benefit of this cap and gown pickup is like students are already kind of standing in line, like doing a kind of bureaucratic activity. They're not finishing homework or running from class to class. You kind of have generated a little bit of space and time where students are kind of naturally able to kind of sit down and fill something out. Lunchtime can work, but sometimes one of the challenges there is that students have other priorities, and because it's free time, they might be hesitant to give it up to come and fill out a form. Some of the other notes in the chat, have the junior class organize this for the senior class. Again, one of the cool things that you can do to kind of help make a voter registration drive seem like a rite of passage and a celebration is attach it to annual traditions in some way. I believe Portsmouth has their junior class organize the drive for the seniors, so that not only is there kind of an existing group on campus that year after year can be counted on as it being their responsibility to run the drive, But the added benefit of having some of the younger students organize it for the older is that, you know, the juniors now anticipate like, oh, okay, next year, the group that comes after us is going to be organizing a drive for us. I can be, I'll be waiting for that, so that I can register to vote then. All right. Okay, any questions from the group on some of the voter registration drive strategies that we're talking about? The kind of maybe in classroom or assembly style or school day tabling events? Any questions? Have you met and recruited already registered peers in the student body? I don't think we've, I think that is a great place to start in terms of if you're looking to organize a drive in a school community, maybe like the most motivated or students who already kind of are excited about the idea of voter registration are probably the ones who are already registered. I think that is a good group of students to tap into on a campus to ask for their help in running a drive. I think the other thing that I'll mention here is that while the logistics of a drive are largely handled by kind of the town clerk or the supervisor of the checklist, they're collecting the forms, and maybe an educator, school administrator, or a community volunteer, like folks on this call, might be trying to schedule and coordinate the date and time of a drive. Students have a really important part to play in talking to their peers about why it's so important to register to vote. And so I like that you brought up this idea of like looking to students who've already registered, and maybe if you're an educator on this call, asking if they would be willing to staff the table or talk to their friends and make announcements in class in the days or weeks leading up to the drive about why it's so important to register to vote, or things like that. Students can play a really important part in promoting the drive and encouraging people to participate, even if they don't collect the forms themselves. Great ideas. I'm wondering about ongoing support for new voters. Do you keep a list and follow up? We don't collect student data. Yeah, Olivia, I'm not sure. Is there any additional? There's not much of a, in other states that have adopted online voter registration, a lot of platforms have developed kind of ongoing get out the vote tools that piggyback off of that online voter registration process by being able to text or email students or registrants election reminders and things like that. But until we have a little bit more of an automated system, there's not much of a there's less of a structure able to support get out the vote like that.
I do want to answer Karen's question. There are rules. You cannot offer anything in exchange for voter registration. You can offer cupcakes to everybody, or candy to everybody, or pizza to everybody, but you cannot give anything as an incentive to register to vote. There is a law against that. So if you do bake cupcakes for the drive, make sure they're available for everybody, not just the kids that register, or stickers or anything. We can't give anything as an incentive.
We'll get to some materials that we can provide to help you start with giveaways in a second. So I'll let Sam pick it back up with step 2.
Sure. Step 2, you're going to want to pick your date, time, and location. Like I said, I recognize some of the faces on here, so I've had some meetings with some schools in my short time with Open Democracy, but you know, I've had schools pick their date and times, you know, right when I met with them. If you still haven't had your date, time, or location picked out yet, it's not a big deal whatsoever. You know, we can kind of help you with that. You know, you're gonna have to consider a couple things. You're gonna have to consider your school calendar and your election calendar. And as we previously mentioned, you're going to want to attach these towards annual events. So whether it be, cap, gown, and ballots, where they're picking up their cap and gowns. I saw somebody in the chat say, picking up yearbooks. That would be another option. These assembly method that we mentioned could be another way as well. And then you're going to want to connect with your clerk's office or supervisors of the checklist to help kind of bridge them in on when you're planning to hold these events and if they're available on those days. Step 3, you're going to want to build your team. Obviously, you're going to need your town city clerk's office and your supervisors of the checklist so they can register these new voters or new potential voters. You're going to need educators and administrators. We talked a little bit about peer-to-peer promotion. You're going to want a student-led, adult-supported drive. The highest turnout in these drives happens when students are heavily involved and they're able to talk to their friends or classmates. Say they're in a club, they can talk to people in their club or a sports team, about the benefits of registering to vote. And as we said, kind of these kids are only 17, 18 years old. So they might not know all the logistics that go into it. And that's where volunteers or teachers, educators, administrators kind of come into play in helping, who are the supervisors of the checklist, who are the town clerks, where are their offices located, etc. Parents are a big part of the team. We mentioned Steve from Portsmouth previously, and the role he plays in setting it up and at Portsmouth High. And then community volunteers. Obviously, a lot of you guys here are community volunteers, and it's great that you guys are taking such a liking towards this initiative as it really is something that we deem as important, and obviously you do as well. So whether it be staffing these tables or helping promote, what can you do to help be a part of this team?
I'll share, I'll drop in, I see a couple questions in the chat about how to connect with a school. I'm going to kind of take us a little bit out of order here just so I can address some of those questions really quickly, but then I'll get back to it. I think one of the #1 ways that folks can help support a drive if they're a community volunteer is kind of help students and educators or a school get access to these types of resources. Like we're offering this workshop today, we'll have a recording and a toolkit that we'll make available to students and educators that want to run a drive. Sam is looking for connections to schools. So if you are a volunteer on this call and have a school in mind in your community that you might be able to reach out to, we'd love for you to kind of figure out who might be a good point of contact at that campus and help us connect with them. Sam can get in touch and provide some of our resources or this recording. I also run workshops for like kind of drop-in workshops for any students or educators who want to run a drive from anywhere in the country. And I can kind of talk about New Hampshire specific rules there. So one of the resources I'll share at the end is like this flyer that you can send to a school, take you with you to a school or a campus or hand to an educator or student if they want to learn how to run a drive. Let me take us back. All right, so those are some kind of members of the team to help take us through next steps of the drive. Another big part is promoting the drive effort.
Yeah, promoting is huge. Obviously, you're going to want to get as many students as possible to register to vote to help strengthen democracy. and kind of pass it on to the next generation and leave it in good hands. Kids nowadays, like I said, are all on social media, whether it be YouTube or Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X or Twitter, etc. Social media is a big tool to help get students to register to vote. In our toolkits, both in the Civics Center and at the Open Democracy Toolkit, we have templates for social media posts for, say, Instagram or Facebook, where you can kind of put in your information for your school and your drive and able to kind of get it out there. We have templates for emails to send home to parents about what is needed to register to vote, or teachers or administrators asking them for support. Text is another great way, especially if you're a student, peer-to-peer. You guys are obviously going to be talking one another. And a lot of these times, it can be through texts or group chats, encouraging your peers to vote. Again, talking about templates, we have flyers, posters that you can put in the hallways. Kids are going to be walking through these hallways, 5 days a week, and maybe even more if they have clubs or sporting events. And so putting these flyers and posters in high activity areas around your school, it could be, in the lunchroom or in the gym or in the hallways of, certain wings, whether it be social studies or science or math, etc. You can do in-class announcements. If you're a teacher, you can get up in the beginning or the end of class, or this goes for students as well. You can just say, I just want to let you guys know we're holding a voter registration drive on so on and so forth. It'd be great to have you guys participate to help strengthen democracy and have your voice be heard. And then in the community, you can reach out to parents, like we said, with emails or texts or through social media. And you can even reach out to your local media. It can be newspapers or it can be emails again that go out. And so, reaching out to local media helps put eyes on it, and it can help be a reflectory story on the success of your drive.
Yeah, there's kind of two ways of promoting a voter registration drive effort. There's the kind of promotion that it would be great for students to lead within their campus. Like, they know best how information travels around their student community. And so encouraging them to think about, like, where should we post about this? How should we announce it? Like, where are people going to find out about this upcoming drive and what they need to bring? I think that's, you saw, like, students have to meet eligibility requirements and bring materials to the drive. So a big part of the promotion is this kind of educational awareness building component of, hey folks, we're running a voter registration drive. This is when and where it'll take place. This applies to you. If you meet these criteria, bring one of these forms of ID with you. And we have templates for flyers and social media posts and things like that students and educators can use to help that with that promotion on campus. But there's also, as Sam mentioned, the kind of community element, thinking about how to get the word to parents so that they don't freak out when their student asks for a birth certificate or something like that. That they know what's going on their child's campus. Or reaching out to local media, because the only thing better than running a voter registration drive on a campus is inspiring other schools to take it up too. We want to showcase and uplift successful student voter registration drives so that other campuses take them on as well. I'll interrupt Sam for a second to say, we've mentioned in the chat, like, giveaways and things like that. We're able to offer anyone who signs up a drive what we call a Democracy in a Box toolkit. It's a free, cute, if I do say so myself, a very cute little box that we'll send to drive organizers that includes a bunch of resources that can be helpful for an upcoming drive. It includes those kind of templates that that we mentioned, posters, clipboards, pens, stickers, some that say "I registered to vote" for folks who do successfully register, and even some vote stickers that are that if a student isn't eligible yet but wants to support the cause, that we got something for them too. T-shirts, cards from our partners at Vote Writers about voter ID laws. We're able, again, and a few fistfuls of candy, depending on, we try and scale up depending on the size of the campus. So again, like, we cannot bribe anyone to register to vote through, whether it be through Jolly Ranchers or school credit, but we can offer incentives that get students excited to come over to a table and learn about voter registration. All we ask, and Olivia dropped the link in the chat there, all we ask is that folks try and order the box at least 2 weeks before the date of their drive. So basically, as soon as a school knows when their drive will take place, we ask that they try to order their toolkit so that we can get it to them in time. Karishma.
Molly. So I saw some notes here about Exeter because there's a lot of folks from Exeter here. So, and I think Olivia knows about this, that they have been trying to organize a drive. Unfortunately, the students are running into quite a bit of bureaucracy, and so they haven't managed yet. So there are several groups represented at this meeting. So there are educators who will, of course, specifically target their school, as well as students. But then there are about a dozen or so community volunteers. We're trying to learn the process so we can support it. And I see that Sam does have a list of schools that we don't need to bother targeting because they might already be actively running drives, like Portsmouth High you mentioned. We might be able to support someone like Exeter High where maybe they're running into trouble, and target other schools where maybe no one knows about these drives or any information. So we will definitely get in touch with maybe Olivia and Sam. But I do realize I don't know if it's called it would fall under disenfranchisement, but this is really difficult in New Hampshire.
Yeah, a newspaper article said we're the 50th hardest state to register to vote. Because you have to do it in person and you're required different documentations. There's different ways where people judge that, but you're right, but we're here to help. And I will say that when Steve Bourne ran his first drive in Portsmouth, there were obstacles that he had to overcome, and we were here to help overcome those obstacles. And so I would say that there's a network of people, and if Exeter's having a hard time, I'm putting Kevin Fleming, who's a professor at Winnicott, but he lives in Exeter, and maybe he can also help Exeter students get their drive off the ground. Sorry, Kevin, to put you on the spot.
Olivia,
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, this is Stephen. I've already been trying to talk with Maddie Page, and I'll step in and help at Exeter. I've only worked like 20 minutes from there. I can come to the school, and I'm in sales, and I start working when people say no.
Yeah, just to quickly echo Olivia's point, like, we understand there are obstacles, and we are here to help. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. I know, Karishma, you emailed me, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. And so, we're here to help. So if anyone else is feeling that there are a lot of obstacles in their communities, please feel free to reach out to me or Molly or Olivia and see how we can help kind of institute these drives in your communities.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, because I think some of us who have never done this, I don't want us to get discouraged. There's a nice group of healthy, we're really trying to energize ourselves and participate. So we don't want to be discouraged. So we will tap into your resources and see how we can support you.
And I know there's some folks at Phillips Exeter Academy too. So, I don't want to combine the two different schools in the same town.
So I'm affiliated.
Hold on, let me just say one thing, Jackie Weatherspoon. For many years, I stopped right before COVID. I was a substitute teacher at the high school in the Voc in Exeter, SAU 16. You have to get a teacher involved. Like you're saying, Olivia, it's not just one or a parent, it's a community. And there are teachers there who, if they know you, they trust you, that they will work with you. I did a fun drive there years ago. It was in the cafeteria. They came, it was multiple towns, and it was very successful. I tried to do something fun. We couldn't get it off the ground because we waited too late to have their favorite song played on the radio that day. Radio was in existence, the local station would play the favorite song or rap song or whatever of the kid after they registered to vote. So there are people over at SAU 16 who will help. As far as Phillips Exeter goes, we do have the clerks come. There are no problems with that. We had challenges this year because we waited too late. And what you're saying to us is get organized early, choose an event like the prom. And I'm so happy Rishi's on the call because Rishi's a student here. And that's how this will bubble up on our campus, I know, is you have to get the students involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
All right, folks, I want to leave time for kind of brainstorming and questions. And so I think we've kind of touched on this, like I think we still want to talk through like what it takes to put the drive together. But there's also the element of like, this is an iterative let's be honest, it should not be the responsibility of students and educators to make sure that all their students are registered to vote. We are building a system because right now what we're doing is not reaching our youngest voters. We're trying to build a proactive system to meet a gap in our democracy. So I think don't be hard on ourselves. This will be, we may face challenges. The first drive may not always be the most effective, but starting this process and starting to figure out how to build a tradition of voter registration in every high school, that's the point. We want these types of drives to happen, not just in 2024 and again in 2028. We want them to happen every year so that every 18-year-old gets a meaningful chance to register to vote. So I'm so thankful that everyone joined this call.
I just want to say, like,
please.
Can I just add, like, Pembroke High School did a drive before the primary. They did one in June. They're doing another one in the spring when more are 18. They're all planning one. So you don't have to be limited to one drive. You can do multiple drives, but also do it in the off year. Do it before town meeting next year. Think about ways where you can sort of say, okay, we want more students to show up and vote for school board candidates. So think about those other opportunities too. So if you don't have time to get a drive off this spring, start planning right now for September. Or October.
All right. I wanted to give us some time to join some breakout groups by region so that folks from similar areas could talk about what drives are taking place, what drives, what schools might need to might need some support or have some proactive outreach. But before we go into breakout groups, are there any questions that anyone wants to raise here that might be helpful for the whole group? Any questions on drive strategy before we head to breakout groups?
Molly, I was wondering if you had to look at the most important steps to do, and if you're looking to have something happen before the beginning of June, would you say that getting the clerk willing to do something, finding the teacher, finding, like, is there a priority of who you can't do it without the clerk, right? You can't do it without your supervisor of the checklist. Is there a strategy for making sure that you can make the clerk happy about doing this?
I think the first is the student. I find if you find a student that wants to make something happen, they can actually make everything else happen. So finding the student is sort of the first step. And the supervisors of the checklist, if you can't get the clerk, you can get the supervisor of the checklist. Each town has 3, so you can find somebody who's available. But I think getting a student or somebody or a teacher at the school is sort of your first connection.
Yeah, I'd agree. A point of contact at the school is the first move. I think whether it is a student or educator or a club on campus or like someone mentioned, Steve mentioned kind of having the junior class organize it for the senior class. If there's an existing kind of body or structure or club on campus that could take this on, then you kind of have a group of students and a faculty advisor kind of all in one. So I think that could be an ideal place to start. Student council, absolutely. All right, Kate.
Am I unmuted? Yeah, I asked a question in the chat about, and this is to Chris Smith's point too about bureaucracy. Do you get blowback from parents or, other people saying, why are you sending out emails? How are you even getting my email address? Things like that. I've found that in past iterations at our school, and again, this isn't with a student or a teacher organizing things, like it's hard to get access to that kind of information. So what about that?
We haven't gotten a lot of blowback, especially when we frame these as we want all kids to register to vote no matter what party. People understand that civics is important. So Kate, thanks for that question, but we haven't gotten it. The harder thing is that a lot of schools have like filters where you can only, like, students can only email students and not outside world. So we've had a little bit more technology issues where, open democracy gets stuck in a spam folder. Jackie?
Yes, I'd like Donna, if she's still on the call, to talk about the enthusiasm that we got from the supervisor and what she did last year, Donna. I think that would help a little bit.
Yeah, it was great. She actually was more than happy to come as often as we wanted her to. And the other thing that she offered was if we wanted to have like a conversation about voter registration and disinformation. And so the town of Exeter supervisor was phenomenal. So, if you get that opportunity to reach out to her and work with it, she'll do just about anything because she wants people to vote and she wants people to be registered to vote. So I just want to put that plug in. So it was a really good experience for us at Phillips Exeter.
And I also think you make their jobs easier by registering in advance than registering on same day. So Oftentimes those supervisors of the checklist are grateful that you've organized something because it makes their life a little bit easier.
And they would prefer that than for all the kids to go to the town hall to register because it's just too much traffic into the town hall. So, yeah.
Thank you. So Donna, it was really good to hear, and Jack, that the supervisors are very agreeable at Exeter. So we have 3, because one of the ideas, again, this is the community group, not the educators group within this call. What we're thinking is we'll take some of these ideas, we will help you target some of these high schools, but we also want to target the general population. So we were thinking of like a farmer's market or other ways to get people who are not registered.
Right.
So maybe we'll see if maybe that might be actually easier to organize, and then we'll get the hang of it and then proceed with schools.
I was even wondering if we could do something at like the town. I mean, we're talking Exeter right now, but I mean, even something at, you know, the town hall, you know, where they have a lot of events. That might be something to try and get young people there. But anyway, yeah, we can talk about that.
I think, yeah, sounds like a good chance to hop into some breakout rooms. I think I'll send us to breakout rooms for about 5 minutes, just to get connected, identify if there are any specific like regional questions or collaborations that can spring up from this call. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry that we cut short our breakout room time, but I hope folks got to make some initial connections that maybe can be followed up with later on for further discussion and advice. I was excited to be in breakout room 1. You know, people talked about, you know, we've tried this here and it's been slow, or, you know, you know, if there's enthusiasm from volunteers outside, you know, how do we get schools to take us up on the offer for this support? I think there's a lot of a good conversation going on that I think we'll have to continue to make this really a statewide effort. I know we've come up on our time, and so I wanted to wrap up our last couple of slides before people head off for the evening, but we can stay on and take questions from anyone for a few minutes if need be. Again, I shared this a little bit earlier, but in some of our follow-up materials, we'll send a flyer that includes an invitation for a student or educator to come to a workshop. You know, if you feel like it would be, maybe you're a volunteer and you have wanted to do a voter registration drive, but like need something to grab students or an educator's attention, maybe like a free 1-hour how to run a drive workshop could give you like the concrete meeting point to like really start a discussion about how to make this happen in a specific school community. So we hope some of these kind of drop-in workshops could be an opportunity for that. But we're also here to provide as much ongoing support as possible.
Yeah,
if
right.
you want, if you need support kind of connecting with your town clerk, or you face barriers or obstacles, you know, we've seen a lot of things. Supervisors thinking that they aren't able to go to high schools. Not true. We've fought some of these battles before, and so if you please reach out to the Civics Center and Open Democracy if you run into barriers within schools or communities, we can help give you the backup you need to overcome them. Again, we have a toolkit and materials that we'll be sending out your way. Schools can order the Democracy in a Box toolkit as soon as they know the date of their drive. If you need help speaking to your school board, principal, or superintendent, other templates or resources, if there's anything that we haven't provided that you think would be helpful, please let us know and we'll do our best. Again, we want to build a sustainable kind of system and all the materials and resources needed for every high school to make this a part of their academic experience every year. with that, I'm gonna drop Sam's email in the chat as a main point of contact for follow-up after this event. But I think we will include mine and Olivia's emails as well on the wrap-up email, so you'll have a connection to us all.
I look
All
forward
right.
to hearing from you all.
All right,
And
folks.
remember, ask for help. I love in our little breakout room, that, one person was looking for a teacher and she's like, my daughter-in-law teaches at that school. So, we're a small community in New Hampshire. So, put those feelers out and make those connections. So thank you all for being with us tonight.
All right. Thank you, folks. Enjoy your night.